Moving into our dream home felt like the perfect new beginning. A quiet suburban street with tree-lined roads, well-manicured lawns, and neighbors who waved as if they genuinely meant it. My partner and I had spent years saving for this moment, imagining a place where we could finally settle down and enjoy a peaceful life. The house itself was exactly what we'd hoped for. A cozy two-story with a wraparound porch and a garden I couldn't wait to make my own. On the day we moved in, the sun was shining, the air was crisp, and everything felt like a fresh start. As we unloaded boxes, we exchanged excited glances, already picturing barbecues in the backyard and lazy Sunday mornings on the porch swing. Everything about the neighborhood seemed idyllic. Kids rode their bikes along the sidewalks, retired couples tended to their flower beds, and the overall atmosphere felt welcoming. It was a hallmark moment come to life. That is, until I found the letter taped to my front door. At first glance, it looked like a friendly neighborhood welcome note, maybe a homemade pie invitation or an introduction from a kind neighbor. But when I peeled it off and read the contents, my stomach twisted. It was a notice from the Homeowners Association. Welcome to the community. Attendance at our monthly HOA meeting is mandatory for all residents. We look forward to your participation in maintaining the integrity of our neighborhood. Mandatory? That was unexpected. I had never lived in a community with an HOA before, but I'd heard stories. Some good, some less so. Till I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a formality. Maybe the HOA here was reasonable. My partner Jake raised an eyebrow when I showed him the letter. That's weird. I thought HOAs were just for making sure people didn't paint their houses neon green or leave junk cars in the yard. That's what I thought too, I said, tucking the paper into a drawer. I guess we'll find out. Neither of us knew that this would be the first of many warnings. That behind the friendly smiles and pristine front yards lurked something far worse than we could have imagined. And at the center of it all was Eleanor Tate. The HOA meeting was held in the community center just a short walk from our house. When Jake and I arrived, the room was already filled with residents, their voices buzzing in low conversations. At the front of the room stood a long table where a handful of people sat, all of them looking as though they had been plucked straight from a corporate boardroom. At the center of it all was her, Eleanor Tate. She was an older woman, immaculately dressed in a beige blazer and pearl earrings, her silver hair pulled back into a tight bun. In one hand she held a clipboard and in the other, a pen she tapped against the table with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Her presence alone made it clear. She was in charge. Jake and I slipped into seats near the back as the meeting began. Eleanor wasted no time launching into what felt more like a corporate presentation than a neighborhood gathering. She spoke of community integrity, upholding standards, and ensuring compliance with HOA regulations. Every sentence was polished, rehearsed, and laced with authority. Then came the first real shock. Due to rising maintenance costs and community improvements, HOA dues will be increasing by 25%, Eleanor announced, scanning the room with a practiced, knowing look. A few people in the audience muttered, shifting uncomfortably. One older man raised his hand. Excuse me, but what exactly are these community improvements you're talking about? The neighborhood looks the same as it did last year. Eleanor gave a tight-lipped smile. We are planning upgrades to the community park, street repairs, and aesthetic improvements to the entrance sign. These are necessary investments for the benefit of everyone. Another woman chimed in. Will there be a breakdown of how our fees are being spent? Eleanor's smile faltered only slightly. The HOA board has reviewed the budget in full. We assure you these expenses are justified. That didn't sit right with me. So, there's no way for us to see exactly where the money is going? I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and assessing. The details of the budget are reviewed by the board. It is not necessary for every resident to scrutinize the numbers. That is why we have elected officials. A few quiet chuckles rose from the room at my expense, but I wasn't deterred. With all due respect, if we're being asked to pay more, we have a right to know where it's going. For a brief moment, something flickered across Eleanor's face, something cold. Then just as quickly she recovered, offering a placid smile. I assure you transparency is important to us. But we must also trust in the leadership of this community. Jake nudged my arm under the table, a silent warning that I was pushing too hard. I let it go for now, but I knew I had just painted a target on my back. After the meeting, as people trickled out of the room, A few residents gave me knowing nods, silent support. Others avoided my gaze altogether. But Eleanor? She met my eyes directly, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was a warning. And it wasn't long before she made good on it. The first signs that Eleanor had taken an interest in me came in the form of subtle inconveniences. Things small enough to be dismissed as coincidences, but frequent enough that they couldn't be ignored. It started with the HOA violation notices. A bright yellow paper was taped to my front door one morning, the bold letters glaring up at me. Violation notice. Lawn maintenance required. I frowned. Our lawn was freshly mowed, the edges trimmed, the flower beds neat. Confused, I flipped the paper over and saw a vague description. Failure to meet neighborhood aesthetic standards. No details. No specific issues. Just an arbitrary accusation. The next day another notice appeared. Trash bin violation, improper placement. Except our trash bin was exactly where it was supposed to be. Then came the third. Unauthorized fence adjustment. Which was particularly odd considering we didn't even have a fence. Jake was skeptical at first. Maybe it's just some automated system? A mistake? I wasn't so sure. And when I confronted Eleanor about it at the next HOA meeting, her response all but confirmed my suspicions. She listened to my complaints with an expression of polite boredom, waiting for me to finish before offering a placid smile. These violations are issued based on reports from concerned residents. I suggest you take them seriously. Concerned residents, I repeated. Or just you. A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably, but Eleanor didn't even blink. The HOA exists to ensure community standards are met. I trust you will comply moving forward. That was the end of the discussion. But it wasn't the end of Eleanor's interference. A week later I woke up to find deep tire marks across my driveway. The kind left by heavy vehicles. At first I assumed it was an accident. Maybe a neighbor's contractor had turned around too sharply. But then it happened again. And again. Each time the tracks were fresh, the damage worsening. I followed them to the end of the street, where a construction crew was working on a house renovation. A cement mixer and a few pickup trucks were parked haphazardly, half blocking the sidewalk. I approached the foreman, a burly guy with a sunburned neck and a clipboard tucked under his arm. "Hey, are your guys the ones driving up my driveway?" He barely looked up. "Yeah, probably. Easiest place to turn around." I blinked. "Okay, but my driveway isn't a public street. It's private property." He shrugged. "Talk to the HOA. They said it wouldn't be a problem." I knew exactly who to talk to. That evening I sent an email to Eleanor, politely informing her that unauthorized vehicles were causing damage to my property. Her response was as infuriating as it was predictable. If construction workers need temporary access for community projects, it is in the best interest of all residents to cooperate. Your driveway is not being permanently altered, and as such this is not an HOA concern. That was it. No apology. No solution. Just a smug dismissal. So I decided to handle it myself. The next afternoon I went to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty chain and 2 metal posts. By the evening I had installed the chain across the entrance of my driveway, secured with a sturdy padlock. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. For 2 days everything was peaceful. The tire marks disappeared. The workers found another way to turn around. And I thought, just for a moment, that maybe Eleanor had finally let it go. I should have known better. On the 3rd day I was watering my garden when I saw a police car pull up in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions neutral as they approached. "Afternoon," one of them said. "We received a complaint about a possible obstruction." I frowned. "Obstruction?" They gestured toward the chain. Before I could respond, Eleanor appeared, stepping onto the sidewalk with an air of triumph. "This chain is obstructing access and violates community guidelines," she declared. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "This is private property. The chain is here to stop construction vehicles from trespassing and damaging my driveway." The officers exchanged a look. One of them stepped closer to inspect the setup, then nodded. "It doesn't appear to be obstructing public access. If it's on private property, it's not a legal issue." Eleanor's face turned an impressive shade of red. "But it's unsightly. It brings down the aesthetics of the neighborhood." The second officer sighed. Ma'am, this is a civil matter, not a police matter. We suggest you resolve it through the HOA. Eleanor clenched her jaw, clearly unhappy. The officers left and I turned to her, expecting some kind of verbal sparring. But instead she simply glared at me for a long silent moment before storming off. That night I found a formal notice taped to my door. HOA fine issued. $1,000 for unauthorized modification. It was the last straw. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to win. The fine was laughable. Not because of the amount, $1000 was no small sum, but because it was so blatantly retaliatory. Eleanor wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She was coming for me and she expected me to back down. She didn't know who she was dealing with. That night I sat at my computer determined to find a way to fight back. I combed through the HOA bylaws, searching for any clause that supported her claim. Hours passed, my frustration mounting with each page. And then I found it. The bylaws made no mention of driveway modifications on private property. No rules against chains. No restrictions on preventing trespassing. Eleanor had fined me based on nothing. It wasn't a violation. It was intimidation. I wasn't the only one she had done this to. The next day I started talking to neighbors. At first they were hesitant. Some avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably when I brought up the HOA. But then quietly, carefully, stories began to trickle out. Unexplained fines. Sudden fee increases. Vague notices about community standards without actual explanations. People had been dealing with this for years but no one had dared push back. Till now. One name kept coming up. Rachel Mason. Rachel was a local journalist, known for exposing corruption in small-town politics. If anyone could help me shine a light on Eleanor's power trip, it was her. I reached out, attaching copies of the bogus fines, the driveway photos, and a summary of my experience. Her response came within an hour. This is exactly the kind of abuse of power I investigate. Let's talk. When we met at a local coffee shop, Rachel wasted no time getting to the point. HOA corruption isn't new, but this is personal. Eleanor isn't just enforcing rules, she's weaponizing them. I nodded. She's running the HOA like her personal empire. And people are too scared to fight back. Rachel sipped her coffee, eyes sharp. Then let's give them a reason to. Over the next few weeks, we dug into HOA records, financial statements, and anything else we could get our hands on. What we found was worse than I had imagined. Eleanor's husband owned a shell corporation, a so-called construction company that had been awarded multiple contracts by the HOA. The inflated fees? They were being funneled straight into that company. Homeowners were unknowingly paying for community improvements that never happened while Eleanor and her husband pocketed the cash. But that wasn't all. Trips to luxury resorts, expensive renovations to Eleanor's home, even a new car. All of it funded with HOA money. She had been robbing the neighborhood blind. Rachel's article was brutal. HOA President Eleanor Tate caught in financial scandal. Where did the money go? Within hours of publication, the story exploded. Neighbors who had once been silent started talking. Local news stations picked it up. Eleanor, who had ruled with smug confidence, suddenly found herself on the defensive. But instead of retreating, she did what desperate people do. She doubled down. The harassment escalated. Anonymous complaint letters started appearing in my mailbox. A drone hovered outside my living room window late at night, watching. And then one night I woke up to the smell of smoke. My backyard shed was on fire. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. The structure collapsed in a pile of charred wood and ash. But the security cameras had caught everything. Two men dressed in dark clothes sneaking onto my property with a gas canister. I sent the footage to the police. The next morning they arrested Eleanor and her accomplices. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. I should have known Eleanor wouldn't go down quietly. Even behind bars she had one last card to play. The night after her arrest, I heard the crunch of gravel outside my house. When I looked out the window I saw a dark sedan idling in my driveway. A figure stepped out, moving toward my door with slow, deliberate steps. It was her husband. Jake had already gone to bed, but I stayed frozen at the window watching as the man approached. He was broad-shouldered with the same air of self-importance Eleanor carried, but there was something different in his posture, something unhinged. He pounded on the door hard. I grabbed my phone and hit record before cracking it open, keeping the chain lock in place. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He leaned in, his eyes cold. "You need to drop this. The accusations. The footage. Everything." I stared at him, unfazed. "You mean the accusations that got your wife arrested? Or the footage that proves she's a fraud?" His jaw tightened. "You don't know who you're dealing with. If you don't back off, there will be consequences." I raised my phone, angling the screen so he could see the blinking red light. "You mean like threatening a witness on camera? Because I'm pretty sure that violates your bail conditions." For a moment he paled. Then his expression twisted into a sneer. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, voice firm. "Your wife made the mistake." He hesitated for just a second before backing away. Without another word, he turned, climbed into his car and drove off into the night. I called the police immediately. By morning, Eleanor's husband had been taken into custody for violating his bail terms. The footage sealed his fate. This time there was no getting out. The legal fallout played out like a slow-motion disaster for Eleanor and everyone involved. The charges against her stacked up: embezzlement, conspiracy, arson, vandalism. Her husband wasn't far behind, facing money laundering and fraud charges linked to his fake construction company. The contractors who had helped her? They flipped, testifying in exchange for lighter sentences. Even the HOA board members who had turned a blind eye to everything found themselves under investigation. During the trial I testified. I recounted everything, from the fake violations to the harassment to the fire. When the verdict was read, Eleanor showed no emotion. No tears. No outbursts. Just a quiet, hollow stare as the judge sentenced her to prison. Her husband followed soon after. And just like that, the reign of Eleanor Tate was over. With Eleanor and her husband behind bars, the neighborhood felt different. Lighter somehow. As if a weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders. But there was still work to be done. The first order of business was dismantling the HOA as we knew it. The board, now leaderless and scrambling, called an emergency meeting. For the first time, the room wasn't filled with nervous silence or forced compliance. People were angry. People were ready for change. A vote was held that night. Eleanor's hand-picked board members? Gone. A new committee was formed. One made up of people who actually cared about the community, not just their own pockets. The first thing they did? Overturn every single fine Eleanor had issued under her reign. Residents who had been unfairly charged were reimbursed. HOA financial records were made fully transparent. And any future rule changes had to be voted on by the entire neighborhood. No more backroom decisions. No more unchecked power. For the first time, the HOA wasn't a dictatorship. It was a community. And then, something I never expected happened. Several neighbors approached me, urging me to join the new HOA board. First I laughed. After everything I'd been through, the idea of voluntarily joining the HOA felt insane. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I had fought so hard to fix this mess. Why not make sure it actually stayed that way? So I agreed to serve a 1-year term. During that year, real change happened. The neglected community park was finally renovated. Sidewalk repairs were approved with actual input from residents. Streetlights were replaced and the HOA dues lowered. No more shady deals. No more intimidation. By the time my term ended, the neighborhood had completely transformed. The tension that had once ruled the community was gone, replaced by a sense of unity. When I finally stepped down, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Looking back, I realized something. This wasn't just about Eleanor. It was about standing up, not just for myself but for an entire community that had been too afraid to fight back. Now we were free. Have you ever had a bad experience with an HOA or a power-hungry neighbor? What happened? Do you think HOAs are helpful for communities, or do they cause more problems than they solve? If you were in my shoes, how would you have handled Eleanor? Would you have fought back or tried to avoid conflict? What's the worst HOA rule or fine you've ever heard of? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had an HOA nightmare like this? Let's talk about it. Speech balloon, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the story and want more crazy HOA tales. Bell, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the next wild story. Loudspeaker, share this video with someone who's dealt with a power-hungry HOA. Let them know they're not alone.